Okay, we are in Genesis 49. This is Jacob's last words to his sons. He calls all of his sons in and gives them blessings and curses. Um, and this is this chapter is a little bit challenging in some ways. The Hebrew language, we know generally what the words in Hebrew mean. And words that are difficult, we can look at where they appear in other places and really get an idea within the Bible how they are being used. These blessings and curses are poetry. And so you have grammar rules in Hebrews, and we are aware of those rules so we can understand the language. But then when you get to poetry, and it's not completely different than English poetry, they kind of throw out grammatical rules. You think about a good comparison for us would be like rock music. Um, we were driving to California several weeks ago, and the group America came on, and one of Sarah's favorite songs, because she's from the desert, I went to the desert, through the desert on a horse with no name. And I was listening, I've heard it all my life. I listened to the words closely. I was like, what are they talking about? I mean, clearly about the desert, but they just make up phrases in order to fit their rhyme or whatever. They just make up stuff, and it has no bearing with reality. Sarah got on her phone and looked at it, and she said, "The Horse with No Name is considered one of the most nonsensical songs of all time, only challenged by, I believe it was Tin Man by America." And this band is known as a band who, is just talking about something, and then they make up a phrase in order to complete the sentence, a word. Well, that's kind of the way Hebrew poetry is. It's not, but America just threw out the rules of the English language and communication and comprehension, and that images are supposed to match reality in some way so you can associate to them. They kind of threw that out the window. Well, Hebrew poets kind of do the same thing. Some of these verses, and I don't think we'll get to all of them today. We'll be doing good if we get through Judah today, but we'll see. We'll see. Um, some of these verses have multiple, like, different ways that you could possibly translate them, and we'll see that. Um, we'll see that as we go. So let's carry on here. So this is Jacob's last will to his son. It's a final statement of the theme and the goal of Genesis and maybe the whole Bible. Would anybody like to take a stab at the theme and goal of Genesis and the whole Bible? So you think the whole Bible is about Jacob's family, a record of Jacob's family? I guess in a way you could say that. The Bible is about what? Is it about Jacob's family?
It's about God.
It's about God. And what is God trying to do in the Bible? What's his goal? Redemption of man. God created us because he loved us. He gave us what was good. He made a world that was good. We made a choice to rebel against him. And this book is about God calling us back. And we see those exact things. So I don't fully disagree with you, Faye. But we see all those things in the family of Jacob. What has Genesis been about? God's plan to restore the lost blessing through the seed of Abraham, the family of Jacob. God is restoring the blessing. God gave a blessing. We threw it away. Now he's trying to restore it. So let's review. What have we learned so far? God made everything for a special purpose. Why did God create at least the version we have in the Bible? What was God's purpose in creating the world the way he did? What was the special creation that comes at the end of the chapter and then takes over the rest of the Bible? It was us, wasn't it? Special creation, human beings. God saw that it's good. So that seeing is a godlike quality, the ability to look at things and see the truth. And he saw that the creation he had made was good. It was beneficial. What he had put there was helpful to human beings to live a life for him, with him. God made humans in his image. That's why they're special. We are like God. A tree is a creation of God, but it's not like God. A alligator is a wonderful creation, but an alligator is not like God. We humans were made in his image. We are the special children, the special creation. God bless them. Be fruitful and multiply. Spread out and fill the earth. Have dominion over it. I put the earth here for y'all. That's why I made it.
Well, I'm one of those people that believes there was thousands, maybe eons of years between first and second verse of Genesis. Because God created the heavens and the earth. Now, what does earth mean? Dry land.
Yeah.
And you need the second verse.
And the Spirit hovered above the deep. And the world was void and formless.
Right.
Well, we
go down in the, I think it's the second chapter, maybe 22nd verse. It said God told Adam and Eve to replenish the earth.
Yeah.
Now, what does replenish mean?
Well, I'm not sure in that case. I was stuck on the earth being void and formless. And it's a little bit of a can of worms. Well, we covered this a long time ago, about over a year ago, when we were on that verse. But the original Hebrew version of it said in verse 2, I said in first verse, in a beginning period of time, and it's non-specific. So I sort of agree with you. It's a non-specific. God did not say this much time it took me to make. It said in a beginning time. In the beginning. Could have been a second, blink of an eye, could have been 10 billion years. Just doesn't say. That's not the purpose of that word. In the beginning, God created, in Hebrew, basically the sky and the land. Heavens and the earth but the sky and the land. In other words, you look out your window, you're writing the Bible out the window of your tent, and what do you see out there when you're describing the universe? The sky and the land. That's what they were aware of. Everything. And it says, and it was tohu vabohu in Hebrew, which means an uninhabitable wilderness. The land was such that man could not live there.
God said it was good.
Not yet, he hadn't. He got more work to do. And so he created everything. There's no new stuff here. God didn't come back and create. You know what? I think I will, make a mountain. All the building material was already here. Verse 1, God created everything. Second, but it was uninhabitable wilderness. Man couldn't live there. Basically, as you go back and look at the following verses, it was covered with water. That man can't live underwater. It was uninhabitable wilderness. Now, when the Bible, so that's what Moses wrote the Bible. Probably, we're a little bit hazy on this. The Bible doesn't tell us these things. Probably about 1500 BC. So that's 3,600 years ago. And so that was 1500 BC. It was in Hebrew all the way through. And we still have Hebrew versions. But then about 200 BC, that was about 1,300 years later, about 72 Jewish scholars got together in Alexandria, Egypt, and began translating from Hebrew into Greek, because all the educated people in the world read Greek. And so they were translating the Bible so that the educated people in the Greek world could read the Bible. It's a good thing. But the Greeks thought about creation differently than the way the Hebrews described it. And so that verse 2, Genesis 1, verse 2, modified when it went into Greek. And in Greek it said it was void and formless. And we get this image of the swirling balls of gases in the cosmos collapsing, getting gravity, spinning around, gaining gravity, and collapsing into planets. That's sort of what we see, a lot of people think of. But that would be a contradiction to what it just said. And I think you were sort of pointing that out. To say it was void and formless contradicts what it said in verse 1, that God created everything.
Well, it don't matter. It's wonderful.
Don't yank my string and then take it back. So, I agree with you that there's room for time. What I believe, what I think, looking at the languages, is the creation story is verse 1. What we need to know about creation, what is pertinent to the rest of the Bible, is that God did it. Did it the way He did it. Doesn't say He did it in the blink of an eye. And it doesn't say that He did it in 7 24-hour periods as we know 7 24-hour periods. I do not believe that's what the Bible says. Now, could it be? Is there room in my understanding of who God is that He could do it in 7 24-hour periods? Certainly. No question. What I think is doing there is the writer is showing that God did things in an orderly way. And He used terminology and time that we would be familiar with, a 7-day week. And God worked 6 days like we worked 6 days, and on the 7th, He rested. Was it because God was tired? No. Do we think that God gets tired when He's working? No. Why did He rest? To model appropriate behavior for humans who do get tired. Okay, so it was for the humans' benefit that He said 7 days. And it doesn't say on the first day He did this. It says on a day 1. Anyway, that's a can of worms. But I agree with you. I think there is room for time in there. I do not think that Genesis 1 and 2 contradict science. I don't think science knows as much as it thinks it does.
It's learning more.
Right. Everything that they think now in 100 years will be obsolete, and they won't think it anymore. And see, so my problem is not with science. It's with people saying, okay, well, I don't believe that the Bible agrees with the most current science, so the Bible's wrong. How long has the Bible been around? 3,600 years. Does it still matter? Does it still change things? Does it still matter to who we are and what we believe? Yes, I believe the Bible is more important truth than anything science has to say. But the Bible doesn't exclude science. What is ridiculous is somebody putting their faith in science, and we know that it's going to be different in 10 years. Everybody knows that. But people are putting their faith in something that's going to change and casting off the Bible, which is saying something else entirely. It's not trying to present science. It's not trying to use logical deduction to prove an evidence to prove a point. That's what science does. It's not trying to do that. It's talking about faith and creation and purpose and meaning, which science is completely ignorant about those things. They don't even attempt to talk about purpose and meaning. It's something different. It's like trying to take a fork and cut a tree down with it. You know, science ain't created to do that. And so that's my problem. The Bible is ambiguous about science and time. every now and then it'll hit on it. And what's amazing is how, I'm fascinated by the fact that it says, for God formed you from the dust of the ground, and he breathed his breath into you, and you became a living being. Now in 2021, and the scientific chemical knowledge that I have, I think the Bible author is describing atoms and subatomic particles. We're all made of the same stuff. We materially are made of the same thing as the rocks and the trees and the space dust. But God formed those things in a special arrangement, and we're not the same as a rock. Why? Because we're living. God's breath is in us, and we became living beings. Science can't touch that. And science, they can duplicate a cell, the materials of a living cell, but they cannot get it to come to life. So there's still something essential, and science is ignorant to it. So science is not bad until a human being says, well, I think that science is true and rules, and the Bible is stupid and worn out. That's the problem. Because I'll tell you, saying science is like picking up sand in your hand and holding it. It's going to run through your fingers. But what the Bible said stood then, stands now, will stand throughout time. Correctly understood. Anyway, all right. So, God made humans in his image, and he blessed them. That's the key to Genesis right there. God gave them a blessing. Be fruitful and multiply. Spread out, fill the earth. Live abundant lives. Live your lives, but live your lives walking with God, walking hand in hand with God. Have children, have jobs, whatever you do it hand in hand with God. Live an abundant life, a good life. That's God's intention for us. Now, after he did that, God warned of the consequences. He said, I put everything here. Every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but there are limits. Because I'm in charge and you're not. You may not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is in the center of the garden. That's it. Everything else was put here for you. Be obedient, stay off that tree. Because when you do, dying you shall die. Spiritual death. The world is broken. We've said it already today. You will break the world, and your lives will be one struggle after another. If you get on that tree, I've told you, all these other trees that you're allowed to eat, they're good. So I've given you the knowledge of the good, and that's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What's left for you to learn? Don't touch it. There's only evil left. Well, mankind disobeyed and sinned in Genesis 3:6. And then we went through all the stuff in the primeval history. We've got chapter 12. That's the turning point where we see God's plan. God started the earth, chapter 1. Man fell in chapter 3. Then we see the consequences of that through chapter 11. Chapter 12, God began working a plan. This is about 1800 BC, as best we can tell, when Abraham lived. And in that, he said, through you, I will bless all people, all nations. I will bless those that bless you, curse those that curse you. And in you, in my plan that I am working through your seed, through your line of descendancy, all the nations of the earth will have the opportunity to have their blessing renewed. So that's what Genesis has been about. We pick up now, so that was from the beginning. Now we pick up years later, after Abraham, in Genesis 49. Jacob is a very old man, and Jacob called his sons and said, gather together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Okay? Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, listen to Israel, your father. Notice it mentions both names. I believe when it mentions Jacob and Israel, it is trying to show a transformed life. It is trying to point out that Jacob was a rough character. Israel struggled with God and is now in submission to God. What does it mean by in the last days? Why would he come and say, let me tell you what's going to happen to you in the last days? Is he talking about the last days of their life? These are going to come together? What do you think it means?
Last days of the earth.
In the last days of man's role on earth, in the future, at the end of time, we might say. Interestingly, Balaam, in Numbers 24, his oracle, 14 through 24, used the same phrase to start his oracle. Do you know what he talked about, Balaam? He is the first prophet to talk about this in his prophecy. And he wasn't a Hebrew prophet, by the way. He talked about the Messiah.
He had to say what God told him.
He had to say what God told him. What did God tell this pagan prophet? He said, talk about the Messiah. And he said, in the last days. Now, a king is coming. That's what the Messiah is. A king is coming. He's going to fix this sin problem. Now, everything about Jesus, the number varies from people. I've heard from 318 prophecies about Jesus to 365. But whatever the number is of prophecies fulfilled in Jesus, there are way more prophecies that talk about Jesus' second coming in the Old Testament than talk about his first coming. What is Jesus' second coming? In the last days. So Jesus is a king that's going to affect the outcome, the final outcome of humanity. And also in Deuteronomy 31:9, Moses uses the same phrase talking about the Israelites in the last days. That is the theme here and the focus of Jacob's last will in his blessings to his sons is the future deliverance of the chosen people. That's his focus. The 12 sons are the Israelites and their deliverance at the end of time. Now, does that exclude us? No. In you, in your seed, which has already come, I believe that was Jesus of Nazareth 2,000 years ago, I will bless all nations. I will make this blessing, this deliverance, available to everybody. It's not going to be easy, and they have to have faith. They have to believe. But specifically here, the focus is on the Israelites in these 12 sons. So what is common to all three prophetic passages? They all talk about a king. So there's three occurrences of that in the latter days, in the end of time. And of course, we'll get to it in a minute. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, the scepter being the symbol of being a king. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. It also happens in Numbers 24:7. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. In Deuteronomy 33:5, he was king in Jeshurun, all the tribes of Israel together, under this king. Put these ideas together as we read through these blessings. These are a little bit strange, some of these blessings, but the focus is on the king that is coming in the latter days that will bring these sons back together as they go all out. Now, a lot of these blessings have to do with where the tribe will be given land later, and kind of their situation. And they're debated. I mean, really look in there and see what you think it means, because nobody is on some of these they're so obscure. But put these ideas together: restore, blessing, deliverance through Judah, and a king. And what do you get when you put those concepts together? You don't have to go to Sunday school all your life to see where these are coming. And in the last days, now as a note, one note, it's not talking about Joseph. Joseph is not Judah. I think, and I just put this in parentheses because this is my opinion, I think Joseph's role was to preserve Israel, the 12 tribes, so that they would survive, so they would not die, so that they would live and not die. But he is not the ultimate Savior. I think Joseph exhibits some characteristics. I think he was a role model of faith and exhibits some characteristics that this future king will have. But I think his role is the survival of the Israelites as opposed to being the Savior. There's no intention, I think, that Joseph can save people from their sinfulness or lead them out of sinfulness. The chapter will make a lot more sense when you put those concepts together. That it's about the king who will come of Judah, that will come to deliver, restore the blessing. So the order of the blessings that he gives, just a little side note, is it starts with the sons of Leah, then it goes to the handmaids, and it ends with the sons of Rachel, being Joseph and Benjamin. And again, no mention of Ephraim and Manasseh. They got blessings in chapter 48, and they were given the blessings basically to replace the first two sons, Reuben and Simeon. Somebody, you must be asking lots of questions, Faye. My time is flying by. All right. If we only do 3 verses, that's fine. We'll pick up next week. Is anybody in a hurry? Reuben, you are my firstborn. And if you remember that name, that's Ra-Ben. I have seen, Ra being I see, Ben being son, I see a son. You are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength. The wordplay here, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of my power. You exhibit the first of my strength. However, verse 4, you are unstable as water. You're not fixed. You can't get a grip on you. You shall not excel. Okay? And that is intentional wordplay. Thesis, antithesis. So you are the best of my strength, the excellency of my dignity, the excellency of my power, but you shall not be excellent. Because you have disgraced and dishonored your father. You went up on your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Okay? So if you remember back in Genesis 35:22, it happened when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it. In Genesis 48:5, so that explains why in Genesis 48:5, when Joseph brought his sons, Joseph is given the first portion of the oldest son, the double portion. Okay? And it's divided between his 2 sons. So this is how we did it. We covered this last week, Genesis 48:5. And now your 2 sons, Jacob talking to Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are now adopted as my sons. As Reuben and Simeon, my previous first 2 borns, they shall be mine. In other words, your 2 sons will replace Simeon and Reuben. So Reuben is knocked down the list. Simeon is going to disappear. Simeon's time is marked and limited. By the time we get over to Joshua and Judges, I think he may, I can't remember it. Maybe one mention in Joshua, and he might not be mentioned at all in Joshua and Judges. He's gone. Simeon disappears. He's absorbed into Judah, basically, and just disappears from biblical mention eventually. So here's the explanation of that, given in 1 Chronicles 5:12. It says, the sons of Reuben, firstborn of Israel, he was indeed the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, so that the genealogy is not listed according to the birthright. Yet, however, Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came the ruler, although the birthright was Joseph's. Does everybody follow that? We've covered this, but let's review it. Well, I thought I had a slide on there. Maybe it'll come back in a minute. I'm pretty sure it comes back in a minute. So let's see if it does. If it doesn't, have me explain the difference between the Joseph being the firstborn and Judah being the king, the preeminent one. But I think I have a slide for that later. The unfortunate thing about recording this in this way is I can't go back. I can't backpedal through things. So let's go to the curses on Simeon and Levi. We say blessing and curses. Reuben was cursed. Reuben lost his birthright right there. Simeon and Levi likewise are cursed. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. So they have weapons in their house. Let not my soul enter into their counsel. Let me not listen to them. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. I want to dissociate myself from them. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. What is he talking about? Well, going back to Genesis 34:25, that's when Dinah was taken prisoner by Shechem. They made a deal with the Shechemites to get circumcised. On the third day, when the Shechemite men, the warriors, were in pain from the circumcision, of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword. That phrase, each took his sword, is personal responsibility on each of them, and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. Very intentional, premeditated murder. On down in verse 30 of chapter 34, Jacob condemns them. Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And since I am few in number, there's not so many of us, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me, and I shall be destroyed, my household and I. As we said when we went through that, everybody behaves badly. Simeon and Levi's rashness in premeditated murder and deceit has endangered the seed. They put the seed in jeopardy of being exterminated. So back to Genesis 49 and the cursing. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. As I said earlier, Simeon gets no property. When they give the land allotments in Joshua, Simeon is not mentioned. Levi, by that point, has been redeemed. Levi gets redeemed in Exodus 32 at the golden calf. Very interesting there. Exodus 30, I find it fascinating. Everything about the Levites, but in the Old Testament, just about everything about them is a story of violence. Everything.
Levi didn't get a tribe, though.
Well, they are a tribe, but they didn't get property.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. They got cities, they got little bits of property in everybody else's territory. Exodus 32, Moses comes down from Mount Sinai. He hears a sound like a battle. And he goes down and he looks in the camp, and they use military terms. They said everybody's paired off like a soldier and his buddy. In their formations, they would walk, in a phalanx, a formation, and there'd be a guy in front and a guy in back. And so they said they were paired off like soldiers and their buddies. Well, we don't need to paint the picture too clear. It's men and women dancing with each other around the golden calf. So they were having a little party. And he was so upset. He said, "Who will stand with the Lord today?" It said, the sons of the tribe of Levi, and it uses the exact phrase from Genesis 34. It said, each man in his sword came and stood with Moses, and that day they slew 3,000 of the most apostate people. And after that, very fascinating, and I could talk a lot about it, but after that, Moses says, because you've done this thing, and you have valued the Lord above your brother and above your father, from this day forward you shall be blessed. And so Levi is redeemed there in Exodus 32. And so they do get property, but in fulfillment of this prophecy, they're scattered. Their property, because they're the priests, are little cities and little pockets within the other tribes' territory. So they're spread throughout the tribes so they can be a priest to all the 12 tribes, but they do not get their own land. I've always thought that was a fascinating thing. I was like, that's good stuff. Somebody should write a dissertation about that stuff. So, as I said, they're always associated with violence, both Simeon and Levi. There's only one more little mention of the tribe of Simeon. There are just very few. After Balaam's prophecy, the next chapter is Numbers 25, and they go into what's called Baal Peor. And so it is a place named after the pagan deity Baal. And the Midianite girls come over to camp and start acting like floozies around the good Israelite boys. And one of the Israelites takes a Midianite girl and prances her in front of everybody, Moses and everybody. By this point, Moses is old, and Moses has become a weakling. And it said he wrings his hands and they weep by the tent of meeting. He's inactive. Well, young Phinehas, by the way, a Levite, it says in Numbers 25:7, saw what they were doing, that they'd gone in a tent together. He rose from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand, and he went in and he shish kebabbed the Israelite man and the Midianite girl in the act of misbehavior. So again, violence. It goes on in verse 14, say the name of the Israelite who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, the son of Salu, the leader of a father's house among the Simeonites. So you see, in just that one little brief story, that's one of the very few mentions of Simeon, but Levi is violent and Simeon makes bad choices. Having eliminated now the three oldest sons, do we want to get into Judah, or do we want to make that a clean? It's 3:05. Do we want to make that a clean break point and pick up with Judah next week? Okay, let's do that. So we're going to stop there. We're going to pick up with Judah. Let's read that first slide, and this will be our ending point for today. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. This is in a position of power. And I would say in that, I mean, that is a very Old Testament way of speaking. But this seed that we're coming is going to have power over an enemy. And it is an enemy that we are powerless against. That is an enemy, you can say the devil, or you can say sin. Who here, at the strongest point of faith in their whole life, at the peak of your faith, was able to stop sinning? Is there anybody? No. And this seed that is coming will have his hand on the neck of the enemies. He is one who will be able to overcome sin, I think. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Your father's children, I believe that's people of faith. I believe that's people who believe the word of God will bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey. My son, you have gone up. So you have a young lion who is fed. He bows down, he lies down like a lion, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? Okay? I think he's saying the seed is coming, the lion is coming, the lion of the tribe of Judah is coming, and he's going to have power, but he's not here yet. He's sleeping for now, but in the latter days, he's going to come. And who shall rouse him? I'd say only God. I'd say everybody else better be careful. God can tell him it's time, but everybody else better wait. So we're going to just whet your appetite with Judah there. I think of everything we've talked about in Genesis, to me this is the most important little passage here, because it is making clear and focusing our attention on how God's plan is going to play out. Any thoughts or questions as we close today? Okay. Let's say a prayer. Let's be dismissed. We'll pick up next week in Genesis 49, verse 8, with the blessing of Judah.